My name is Emily Carter. I'm 26 years old. At this age, I thought I had already tasted enough of life's struggles, but nothing prepared me for the moment my own parents erased me in front of the world. "Don't call us your daughter in front of everyone. You embarrass us." The words hit me like a slap across the face, echoing through the golden-lit ballroom. Glasses stilled in midair, laughter shrank into silence, and I suddenly felt as if I were standing alone on a stage under a merciless spotlight. Dozens of eyes turned toward me, not with kindness, not even with shock, but with the cruel fascination people show when watching a tragedy unfold. I stood frozen, my breath trapped in my throat. My parents' faces were carved in stone, cold, composed, as if casting me aside was nothing more than a social courtesy. My heart pounded so violently I thought the entire room could hear it. I wanted to scream, to run, to disappear, but my legs wouldn't move. The setting made the wound deeper. It wasn't a private quarrel. It was a charity gala filled with family friends, neighbors, and influential guests. Some had seen me grow up, had once ruffled my hair and called me Sweet Emily. Now their eyes cut into me with pity, amusement, or disdain. I was no longer a daughter, I was a public spectacle. Across the room, my elder brother Adam smirked faintly. He was the golden child, the perfect heir, the pride of the Carters. I had always been compared to him, always found lacking, but I believed, naively, that blood was thicker than failure. That night proved me wrong. I forced myself to move, one shaky step after another toward the exit. Every whisper in the room felt like a dagger. "That's their daughter? No wonder they're ashamed." The glass doors reflected a young woman I barely recognized, cheeks burning, eyes trembling with tears she refused to shed. Outside, the night air was sharp and cold, biting into my skin as if to remind me I was alive, even if unwanted. The city lights stretched endlessly before me, indifferent and distant. My chest ached with humiliation, but beneath the pain, something unexpected flickered. Anger, yes, but also resolve. Because when your own parents strip you of your place in front of the world, you face two choices: crumble beneath their words or rise so high that even they must bow their heads one day. That night, shivering under the cold sky, I chose not to be their shame. I chose to become their reckoning. That night outside the gala, shivering under the cold sky, I felt as though the universe had already written my fate in letters of humiliation. But as I stood there, the memories of how I had reached this point rushed back like waves, each one carrying the sting of rejection I had endured for years. Growing up in the Carter household was like living in a shadow that never lifted. My brother Adam was the sun, brilliant, dazzling, adored. I was expected to orbit quietly around him, never to outshine, only to reflect his glow. Every achievement of mine, no matter how small, was met with comparison. If I scored well in school, Adam had done better. If I tried a new hobby, Adam had already mastered it. My victories were footnotes, his, headlines. I remember one Christmas when I was 16. I had spent weeks designing a dress from scraps of fabric, pouring all my creativity into it. When I showed it proudly at the family gathering, my mother's smile was polite but empty. Then Adam walked in, casually announcing he had been accepted into an elite debate camp. Instantly, all eyes shifted, applause erupted, and my handmade dress was forgotten. That was the story of my life. Overshadowed, overlooked, invisible. My father was the harshest of all. He believed discipline could mold a real Carter. For him, Adam was evidence that his methods worked. I was proof they failed. He would call me too soft, too emotional, as though kindness itself was a defect. He thought humiliation was a form of tough love. But that night at the gala, I realized it was never about love. It was about control. Still, I never expected the final cut to be delivered in front of hundreds. That sentence, "Don't call us your daughter in front of everyone," wasn't born in a moment of anger. It was the culmination of years of seeing me as unworthy of their name. When I left the gala, I didn't just leave the room. I left behind every illusion I had clung to, that family meant safety, that blood meant loyalty, that I mattered. What I carried with me was pain, yes, but also a strange kind of clarity. I finally understood that I had spent 26 years begging for scraps of love that would never come. And yet, standing in the night air, I also felt something else stir, a hunger I had never known. If they wouldn't give me a place at their table, I would build my own. If they called me shame, I would turn that shame into strength. They thought they had destroyed me in that hall, but they had only awakened a side of me I didn't know existed. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one that no one, not even Adam or my parents, could have predicted. But tell me this, if you were in my place, would you fight to prove them wrong, or would you walk away forever and never look back? I wonder, because for me, the choice was not so simple. The night of the gala marked an ending, but also a beginning I didn't yet understand. The next morning I packed my few belongings into a single suitcase. I didn't leave a note, and I didn't look back. For the first time in 26 years, I walked away from the Carter mansion without expecting to return. Life outside those gilded gates was colder than I imagined. With no savings, no safety net, I drifted from one small job to another. Cafes, boutiques, even late-night cleaning shifts in office buildings, I took them all, desperate to prove that I could survive without their name. Yet each paycheck barely covered rent in my tiny apartment. Some nights I went hungry, staring at the city skyline from my window, whispering to myself, this is better than being their shame. But survival was not enough. Deep inside, I wanted more, not just to exist but to rise. That fire, lit by humiliation, pushed me to work longer, to listen harder, to learn from every mistake. And slowly, opportunity began to knock. It came in the form of Mrs. Reynolds, an elegant woman in her 50s who frequented the cafe where I worked. She had a sharp eye for talent and a softer heart than she admitted. One evening, after watching me juggle impatient customers and malfunctioning machines without breaking, she asked, "Do you always keep your composure, even when chaos surrounds you?" I laughed nervously, unsure if she was mocking me, but she continued, "I see potential in you. Come work for me. I run a small design firm. You'll learn more than you can imagine." It felt like destiny. My childhood passion for design, the same one overlooked at that Christmas years ago, suddenly had a path forward. I threw myself into the job, staying late, sketching ideas, teaching myself the software others used so casually. For the first time, I felt seen. Weeks turned into months, and my designs began to attract attention. Clients asked for me by name. Mrs. Reynolds praised my fresh vision in meetings. I started to believe I was finally on my way to proving my worth. But success has a way of drawing shadows. One afternoon, I overheard two colleagues whispering near the conference room. "She's the Carter girl, isn't she? No wonder she's ambitious." Probably just using Reynolds to climb. My stomach knotted, but I ignored it. Gossip had always followed me. Then came the real blow. I discovered that Mrs. Reynolds had pitched one of my designs, my proudest work yet, to a wealthy client under her own name. My sketches, my concept, my hours of labor, erased. When I confronted her, trembling with a mixture of anger and hurt, she smiled coldly. "Emily, don't be naive. This is business. You should be grateful I gave you a platform at all." It was betrayal, sharp and unexpected. Just when I thought I had found someone who believed in me, she reminded me of the same truth my parents had taught me. In their world, I was disposable. That night, I cried harder than I had since the gala. But even through the tears, I realized something important. Yes, Mrs. Reynolds had stolen from me. Yes, my parents had abandoned me. But they had all underestimated me. What they didn't see was that I had learned, adapted, and grown stronger with every blow. They had taken credit for my work, but they could not steal my vision. And vision, I realized, was more powerful than a family name or a stolen sketch. So I stayed up until dawn, drafting plans for my own future. No more depending on others to open doors for me. I would build my own, even if it took years. Because if humiliation had lit the fire inside me, betrayal poured the oil that made it burn brighter. The night Mrs. Reynolds stole my design, I sat alone in my tiny apartment, papers scattered across the floor like shattered pieces of a dream. But instead of despair, I felt something shift inside me. Every betrayal, every humiliation had taught me one lesson. No one would ever hand me the life I wanted. If I was to rise, I had to carve the path myself. So I began. During the day, I continued my cafe shifts to survive. At night, I sketched, researched, and studied every book and online course I could afford on business and design. I taught myself how to pitch, how to negotiate, how to listen not only to what clients said, but also to what they didn't. Sleep became a luxury, determination, my only fuel. The turning point came when I met Clara, a former colleague also disillusioned by the corporate world. Unlike Mrs. Reynolds, Clara believed in collaboration, not exploitation. Over late-night coffees, we talked about creating a studio that valued fresh ideas and integrity. We started small, just the two of us, one borrowed laptop, and a cramped co-working space that smelled faintly of stale coffee. At first, no one took us seriously. Larger firms brushed us aside, clients scoffed at two young women with no reputation. One investor even laughed in my face, saying, "You're a Carter, aren't you?" Didn't your parents call you the family failure? If they don't believe in you, why should I? The words stung. But instead of shrinking, I leaned in and answered calmly, "Because sometimes the ones you underestimate are the ones who rewrite the story." And I'm here to prove that that meeting didn't end with funding, but it left a mark. For the first time, I realized the power of turning words into weapons, not cruelly, but with clarity and conviction. From then on, every rejection became a rehearsal for the moment I would be undeniable. Slowly, momentum built. A small boutique trusted us with their store redesign. Our work drew attention for its bold simplicity and human touch. One project led to another, and soon we had a portfolio worth showing. Clara and I celebrated each small win like it was a kingdom conquered. But success was never smooth. There were nights we sat in that office, bills unpaid, staring at the numbers that didn't add up. Once, a wealthy client tried to underpay us, assuming desperation would force us to accept. I looked him in the eye and said, "Respect is the foundation of every deal. If you can't honor our work, then you don't deserve it." I walked away, heart pounding, certain I had just destroyed our chances. 2 weeks later, the same client returned, this time with a fair offer. He admitted, almost grudgingly, that my refusal had made him respect me more. It was in moments like these that I discovered the truth. Power didn't always come from titles or money. Sometimes it came from refusing to bow. Clara often told me, "Emily, you have a way of speaking that makes people listen." Don't underestimate that she was right. The years of being silenced at home had taught me to choose my words carefully. Now, those words became the sharpest tool in my arsenal. As our studio grew, so did my confidence. We expanded into larger spaces, hired a small team, and finally began to breathe without fear of collapse. Our name started to circulate in circles I once thought unreachable, and with each new client, I carved deeper into the world that once shut me out. Yet success had an irony I couldn't ignore. The higher I climbed, the more often I crossed paths with people connected to my family. Old acquaintances, distant relatives, business partners who once watched me stumble. They now shook my hand with forced smiles, pretending they had always believed in me. It was both satisfying and painful. Satisfying because I no longer needed their approval. Painful because deep down, a daughter still wished her parents could see her not as a disgrace, but as someone worthy. One evening, after securing our biggest contract yet, Clara and I toasted with cheap champagne in plastic cups. She laughed. "To the day your parents realize who you've become." I smiled, but my heart tightened. I didn't know if that day would ever come. What I did know was that my journey was far from over. The scars of rejection were still there, but they no longer defined me. They fueled me. And in a twist of fate neither Clara nor I could predict, the next chapter would bring me face to face with the very people who had once cast me aside, this time not as their daughter, but as the CEO holding their future in my hands. The months that followed were a blur of deadlines, boardrooms, and victories that once felt impossible. Our studio was no longer a whisper in the industry. It was a rising voice, one that could not be ignored. By then, I had stopped looking back. My life was forward, built with my own hands. But fate has a way of circling back. One autumn morning, Clara walked into my office holding a thick folder. Her face carried a strange mix of disbelief and amusement. "Emily, you need to see this," she said, placing the folder on my desk. Inside were documents outlining a merger proposal. The company seeking our collaboration was none other than Carter Enterprises, my family's empire. For a moment, I just stared at the pages, the name at the top burning into my vision. Carter. My father's company, my brother's playground, the empire I was never meant to inherit. Clara raised an eyebrow. "Do you want me to decline on your behalf?" I shook my head, my pulse racing. "No. Let's hear what they have to say." A week later, the meeting was set in a sleek downtown conference room. I walked in wearing a tailored suit, every step measured, every glance steady. The room hushed as they saw me, not the failed daughter they once dismissed, but a woman who now commanded her own empire. My parents were seated across the table. My mother's hands fidgeted with her pearl necklace. My father's jaw was tight, his eyes scanning me as if struggling to reconcile the woman before him with the girl he had humiliated. My brother Adam, ever the confident one, smirked as though this was still his stage. "Emily," my father began, voice heavy with forced civility, "we appreciate you taking this meeting. Carter Enterprises is facing challenges. We believe a partnership with your firm could be mutually beneficial." His words were smooth, but I heard the cracks beneath them. Rumors had reached me already. Their profits had been declining, projects collapsing under poor management. They were desperate. I leaned back, folding my hands calmly. "So let me understand. The same family that once told me I embarrassed them now wants my help to save their reputation?" The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's eyes lowered. Adam scoffed, trying to regain ground. "Don't flatter yourself, Emily. This is business. We're giving you a chance to be associated with real power." I met his gaze, my voice sharp but steady. "Power isn't inherited, Adam. It's built. And in case you haven't noticed, I've built mine." The executives around the table shifted uncomfortably, sensing the storm brewing. My father cleared his throat, struggling to maintain authority. "This isn't personal," I cut him off. "It was personal the night you stripped me of your name in front of everyone. You made me an outcast in my own bloodline. Do you think I forgot?" My voice didn't rise, but the weight of my words filled the room. For once, they had no defense. Adam leaned forward, his smirk fading. "You can't possibly hold a grudge forever." "Family is family," I almost laughed. "Family?" You made sure I learned that word differently. To you, family meant conditional love, applause for Adam, silence for me. That night you didn't just reject me, you freed me. And now here we are. For the first time, I saw doubt flicker in his eyes. I turned to the documents before me, running a finger over the bold Carter Enterprises letterhead. I could sign this deal. I could save your empire. But ask yourselves, what would that make me? The daughter begging for a seat at your table again? Or the CEO who holds your future in her hands? My father finally spoke, his voice lower, tinged with something dangerously close to regret. "Emily, we made mistakes." I held his gaze, steady and unflinching. "Mistakes end when accountability begins. Until then, they're choices. And every choice you made carved me into who I am now." The room was silent, the weight of my words pressing against every wall. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one shrinking. They were. I didn't give them an answer that day. I closed the folder and stood, my heels clicking like punctuation marks on the marble floor. This meeting is over. When you're ready to treat me not as your daughter but as an equal, then we'll talk. Until then, Carter Enterprises will remain exactly where it is, waiting. Their faces, my father's clenched jaw, my mother's trembling hands, Adam's stunned silence, were etched into my memory as I walked out. For once, it wasn't me fleeing in humiliation. It was them, left behind in the ruins of their pride. As the city lights blurred past the car window that evening, Clara asked softly, "How do you feel?" I breathed deeply, the air filling me not with pain, but with a sense of justice. For the first time, I said, "I feel free." But deep inside, I knew the story wasn't finished. Power shifts, alliances change, and family wounds never close easily. The Carters would come back. They would beg, they would bargain, and perhaps even break. But no matter what came next, one truth remained unshakable. I was no longer the girl they shunned in public. I was the woman who held their future. The conference room confrontation had ended, but its echoes lingered long after. As I left the building that day, the city around me felt different, brighter, more alive, as if it too recognized the shift inside me. For years I had walked those streets with my head lowered, carrying the invisible weight of rejection. Now, every step felt lighter, every breath freer. I was no longer running away from the shame my parents had branded me with. I was walking toward the life I had built with my own hands. In the days that followed, Carter Enterprises sent emails, made calls, even sent envoys to my office, each one more desperate than the last. For a while, I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The balance of power had shifted, and I wanted them to feel it, to understand that the daughter they had once silenced now had the authority to silence them. Yet, late one night, as I sat by my office window overlooking the city skyline, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, but a quiet sadness. The little girl inside me, the one who had once sewn a dress for Christmas hoping her parents would notice, still longed for the simplest thing. Acknowledgement. Not contracts, not apologies delivered under duress, just love. But I had learned that some wounds never heal the way we want them to. Sometimes, healing means letting go of what will never be given. So I made a decision. I agreed to meet them again, not out of weakness, but out of strength. This time there were no sharp words, no dramatic confrontations. Instead, I listened as my father stumbled over phrases like, "We were wrong," and "We should have supported you." My mother's eyes brimmed with tears, though whether they were of regret or fear, I could not tell. Adam remained silent, his pride too wounded to allow humility. And in that silence, I realized the truth. I no longer needed their validation. My worth was not defined by their recognition, but by the life I had carved despite them. When the contracts were finally laid out, I signed, not as a daughter desperate for belonging, but as a CEO securing a deal that benefited my company. My pen scratched across the paper, each stroke a declaration. I was no longer their shame. I was my own triumph. The symbolism was not lost on me. Years ago, they had refused me a seat at their table. Now, I was the one building the tables others wanted to sit at. They had mocked my silence. Now my words carried the power to change boardrooms. They had cast me into the shadows. Now I stood in the light of my own making. And yet, I chose not to humiliate them as they had humiliated me. Revenge might have been sweet, but it was not what I needed. What I needed was peace. By standing tall, by succeeding on my terms, I had already won. As I left that final meeting, I didn't look back to see their faces. I didn't need to. The chapter was closed, and for once, I was the one who closed it. Standing outside, the evening sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. It reminded me of the girl who once stood outside a gala, broken and trembling. Except this time, I was not broken. I was whole. I want to leave you with this thought. We don't get to choose the families we are born into, but we do get to choose the families we build, with friends, with colleagues, with those who see our worth when others don't. Blood may bind us, but respect, love, and integrity are what truly define family. If you've ever been cast aside, if you've ever been told you weren't enough, let my story remind you. Those words don't define you. Your response does. You can crumble under them, or you can rise so high that even the ones who rejected you must watch in awe. And now I ask you, if you were in my place, would you forgive, or would you walk away forever? Share your thoughts. I want to hear them. If this story touched you, consider subscribing to hear more family stories like this one. And if it moved you even a little, leave a like. It may seem small, but it helps these stories reach someone who needs to hear them. Because in the end, stories like mine are not just about pain or betrayal. They are about the courage to reclaim your voice, to build a life beyond rejection, and to prove, most of all, that no one, not even your own parents, can decide your worth.